You're watching TVC Breakfast. Now, sometime last year, the federal government admitted that about half of the country's population live in extreme poverty.
This time, the African Development Bank has come out to say that the poverty rate is more than half of the 36 states of the nation. It's above the national average of 69% of the population. Nigeria now has the highest rate of extreme poverty in the world, making it the poverty capital.
Now, the African Development Bank Africa Economic Outlook 2020 further revealed that 124.2 million people of the country's reported 180 million people live in poverty. And this means that people in the 18 affected states are the worst hit by poverty, making them the poor of the Nigerian poor. We have in the studio right now, joining us, the Executive Director, Paradigm Leadership Support Initiative, Olusegun Elemo. Olusegun, it's nice to see you.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Should I say Happy New Year in February?
Yeah. Yes, you can say that. You can say that.
Well, nice to see you.
Thank you.
Now, the point there is, the African Development Bank has come up with a report, and some people will say, well, it's not new. It is what we already know has been happening and what government does not really necessarily like to talk about. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think the report further validates what we already know. Like you said, many people have been. I think there was a report that came out last year and put Nigeria as the poverty capital of the world. But you know, internally we rejected that report, and spokespeople of the government said no, it's not true and all that. It was after that the president came up on the inauguration day that he said he wanted to lift 100 million people out of poverty. If we're not the capital, poverty capital of the world, how come you want to lift 100 million people out of poverty? But this new report by AfDB, further validates that position. But I think it goes to show the kind of, that the policy, whatever policy we're working on, we're implementing in the country is not working. It's not working for the people. If we have, at the national level, 69%, and now in about 18 states of the Federation, it's even more than 69%. I believe it goes to show that the budget is not performing, whatever it is, because at state level, the relevant arm of government responsible for intervening in development, whether it's the federal government and even the state and local government. So whatever budget the federal government is implementing in states, it's not performing. Because if it's performing, poverty is not just about food. If you don't have access to potable and clean water, you are poor. If you don't have access to quality education, you are poor. If you don't have access to affordable and accessible healthcare, you are poor. So it's not just about food, because we always narrow this down to $2 per day as index. So so all of that indices put together is what AfDB is saying now.
It's obviously a complex situation that we have found ourselves in.
Certainly, and that's what we've said over time, that government needs to now look at how it implements budget.
Is this just about budget implementation?
Because that is the policy document that guarantees that people actually are moved out of poverty. Because that's the spending policy of government. And if what you are spending is not yielding
into prosperity.
Yeah, exactly. Then it
But some will say that the 36 states of the country are endowed with all sorts of minerals and blessed. So we shouldn't be talking about poverty at this time. Is this also an issue of budget?
No, for that's not an issue of budget. It's just it's an issue of whether those states are allowed to tap those resources that you just mentioned.
Based on the law and the
Constitution. Exactly. You know that there are a lot of things in the exclusive list that the federal government is not doing away with. A case in point is the issue of security, and then you see how federal government is struggling with state on that. But I think I will stay on that position that if we allow the budget to perform, you recall that the president a few days ago was at the conference of auditors and was saying that the audit, should do this. Just a few days ago as well, the legislators were saying that MDAs, were not submitting audited accounts and all that. All of this put together is what's making budget not performing. And if budgets are not performing the way they should, it means that whatever money you voted for health, for education, for water, for infrastructure, is not getting to the people. And if it's not getting to the people, people are getting poorer and poorer by the day. And Another issue is with state governments, and they need to now start looking inwards. You know that one of those sectors that AfDB mentioned that, you know, actually performed in that report is transportation. Yes. And you could see some governors now banning some form of transportation in their states. Because if the truth is that you cannot paint a house that is not plastered. Mm-hmm. And that's the case we have in Nigeria today. We want to paint a house that is not plastered. You can imagine what how it will come out.
All right. Yeah. So let's buy some cement and plaster the house first before we paint it.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Olusegun Elemo, for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Right. We have joining us right now, Executive Director of Paradigm Leadership Summit Initiative, Olusegun Elemo. It's nice to have you join us right now.
Thank you for having me.
Now, if you cast our minds back to the mid-70s and late 70s and then into the early 80s, we used to have the development plan and also the rolling plan where, you know, as this is ending, you take it picking up with another so that there's some level of sustainability and consistency and all of that. But right now we don't have that. Is that part of what the challenges that we have right now?
Yes, it is part of it. I mean, even some of those plans that were, you know, put in place by government at the time to, you know, deal with the issue of poverty, it didn't do much. Although it was, of course, you know, there's the notion that at the time even when, for instance, between 1978 and 83 or thereabout, when, you know, China at the time was experiencing, you know, huge poverty, you know, rate, Nigeria was, you know, the poverty rate in Nigeria was quite low. You could attribute that to some of the policies of government at the time, but it also it's not a straightforward, you know, thing. But of course, you can't compare the GDP growth rate at that time to what we have now. But I mean, coming to what is on our hands right now, 124 million, you know, in poverty, more than 69% in 18 states now living in poverty. I think we need to now take this more seriously. And I don't think how we want to deal with insecurity and then leave, you know, poverty the way it is. It's not going to work. It's not going to work out.
All right. Another aspect pointed out by the report is the debt servicing that Nigeria has spent about 50% of its revenue on servicing debts, and the question on the minds of many is that yet Nigeria is still looking to borrow more, and then you begin to hear talks from even the Minister for Finance saying that our GDP ratio to our debt servicing is still within a level, and that is not a problem. But one of the statements made by the AfDB president was that we cannot eat GDP.
Yeah,
exactly.
So how is that affecting us, especially when it comes to debt servicing?
Yes, you know, 10.5 trillion budget. It's easy to think it's a huge money. It's not. You're generating. You hope to generate, you know, revenue about 8 trillion, but half of it is going to debt servicing. So it goes again to show what are we spending on. What are we spending on? We're spending on debt servicing. We're not spending on development. And even the ones that we now vote for development, how do we spend it? Do we spend efficiently? Do we spend economically? Do we spend effectively? Does it trickle down to the poor of the poor that you talked about? Those are the issues. So and how do we now measure whether we are spending efficiently or effectively? It's by, you know, when you put the, you know, mechanism in place. You know, I always say that the federal government, for instance, talks about budget performance in terms of releases of capital to MDAs, release of funds to MDAs. But that's not how to measure whether budget is performing. The way to measure whether budget is performing is when you see your audit report that actually tells you whether the monies that you have spent over that budget here have been utilized efficiently, effectively, and economically. But what you see in the 2016 audit report, what you see again in the 2017 audit report doesn't show that. Yeah. It doesn't show that at all.
It was very spot on when the president of the Africa Development Bank made that statement. We can't eat, no one eats GDP.
Exactly.
Because when it comes to the books, sometimes it's very different from what is really on ground. If you ask the farmers, if you ask the taxi driver, if you ask the normal people on the streets. Now, do we need something like a Marshall Plan to really sit down and overhaul the way that the whole country is, especially the economic side of things, run and how they interconnect?
There have been plans, and there are still plans. There is the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. Yes. There are plans, but what is our commitment to those plans? How do we ensure that those plans are religiously implemented? I think those are the kind of conversation that we should be having. And then, it scares me sometimes when the people that we put in office, we hope on them to do the things, to deliver good governance, also seem to be helpless. For instance, I saw the House Committee Chair on Public Accounts a few days ago, just screaming and appears, to be helpless. He can't do anything about those MDAs that are not submitting audited accounts to the Auditor General. And if those mechanisms are not in place, how do you then measure that monies are utilized efficiently? And if those monies are not utilized, definitely, you will continue to have the level of poverty and inequality that we have in the country. And it just goes to show that if we don't check those numbers quickly right now, we can't deal with insecurity. And insecurity right now will not just be limited to Boko Haram or terrorism. It will blow up on our hands, and then it will come to a stage where we'll be struggling to fight.
Okay, thank you very much, Olusegun Elemo, for your insight into this. Thank you.
Now, according to the report, it says that Nigeria has many opportunities to transform its economy, especially in agro-processing. What are the potentials that lie in that sector that we can explore?
Yeah, there are numerous potentials. I think government is already exploring that. But the sad thing is, just recently I heard about the loan given to farmers in Kebbi State, and they are not repaying some of those loans, and the federal government is now going to court. Whether the agriculture policy, as we speak right now, it's enabling the sector, it's another issue to look at. But I believe the federal government, knows that is one sector that it should focus on, and is focusing on that, putting lots of money into it, and has directed CBN to also, ensure that lots of
How can states maximize this, because they are closer to the people?
Yeah, the states now should I believe some other states now, and I think some in the Southwest region now are beginning to offer lands to farmers to explore agro-processing and the likes. But the key another issue is the technology innovation, whether they're able to leverage on technology to be able to deliver the kind of yields that can then reduce this level of poverty that we have currently. What states now need to do is to see how they can offer offer incentives for young people to come into that space, and then
making it attractive.
Making it attractive, of course, to young people to come into that space and then explore technology innovation and see how they can grow that sector. That's one key sector that everybody believes Nigeria has lots of potential in to drive employment and then bring more people out of poverty. But another area that that report also mentioned is the issue of transportation. Yes. I believe it considered the activities in the transportation sector over the last few years, particularly the rail and then the technology innovation in transportation sector. Yeah. So what state also needs to now do is to see how they can leverage technology and technology innovations and on-demand services, and see how we can then bring more people out of poverty.
All right. On the first day of January 2020, UNICEF estimated that Nigeria had given birth to about 25,500 babies. If we walk the math that way and roughly estimate it, if it continues like that, it means by the end of January, we would have had over 700,000 babies. And if you do the multiplication by the first quarter of 2020, it means we'll have close to 2-point-something million babies. Now, is population one of the biggest challenges or the burden that we have here?
It shouldn't have been a burden. It shouldn't have been a challenge. It should have been a I mean, it should have been a source of strength for us if we're actually utilizing that strength properly. I mean, we should be negotiating with our population.
Okay.
Not
we should use it as a bargaining chip.
Of course.
For anything.
I mean,
okay.
I just saw the last speaker who, I mean, I think the one that came before the last speaker said that you can imagine the second largest economy on the continent it cannot offer the kind of visa incentive that the biggest economy is deserving of. Everybody's looking down on Nigeria. Look at what just happened with the US, saying that they don't even want Nigerians to come on, to the country anymore on immigration. This thing. So we should be negotiating with our population, but it's not happening. So if we are not able to negotiate with our population, then we should downsize the population.
Downsize?
Yeah, we should downsize the population.
You are shaking tables. You are shaking serious tables
and the way
here.
to do that is not for one man to come and say he has 4 wives and 27 children.
All right.
Yeah, because you don't say that because you are a public official, and then your family is not. You cannot even. You have to be able to show us that your family are living off public funds to be able to say that. And even if you say that, what kind of motivation are you giving to other people? Nobody should have. I don't think anybody should have 27 children. I don't think anybody should have 27 children.
That is very relative and very debatable because the point there is that the issue of the right, everybody has the right to make his choice the way he wants to.
Which is true, but the role of government, is to say that yes, you have right, but these are the brackets that your right should stay within. So if, for instance, we are having population problem that is leading us to increased poverty, and then we don't have the kind of structure to take that population out of poverty, then we can then in the interim, cut down that population or just, close it up.
All right.
Thank you for speaking to us.
When it comes to population,
it's quite
and the right to make babies.
It's relative. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.